Before we begin, if you find yourself drawn to tales of historical absurdity, whispered in the quiet tones of irony and dark humor, consider subscribing to Nightfall Notions. Here, we unravel the strangely soothing misadventures of lives long past, like the one you're about to hear, where the call of devotion meets the relentless grind of medieval monotony. Chapter 1. The Call of the Cloister. The first thing you must understand about becoming a medieval monk is that it sounds deceptively peaceful. Picture it, the distant chanting of psalms echoing through vaulted stone halls, the soft scratch of quills on parchment, the fragrant haze of incense curling around your senses like a divine embrace. The world outside is a chaotic mess of war, plague, and peasants who have never heard of bathing, but here, within the hallowed walls of the monastery, time moves with the tranquil rhythm of prayer and contemplation. At least that's what they tell you. The reality, as you will soon discover, is something far less poetic. Your journey begins with a moment of profound spiritual clarity, or perhaps just profound exhaustion with the outside world. Maybe you're a younger son with no inheritance, or a repentant sinner seeking redemption, or just someone who really hates the idea of dying in a pointless feudal skirmish. Whatever the reason, you find yourself standing before the heavy oak doors of the monastery, knuckles rapping against the wood with a mix of determination and desperation. The door creaks open, revealing a gaunt face framed by a tonsure so impeccably shaved it looks like a crop circle on a pale bony field. This is Brother Alaric, the gatekeeper, whose smile is as thin as the broth you'll soon be eating every single day. "Ah," he says, his voice like rustling parchment. "Another soul seeking refuge from the world's wickedness, or its taxes. Come in, come in." You step across the threshold, and the door slams shut behind you with a finality that makes your stomach lurch. The air is thick with the scent of candle wax, mildew, and something faintly reminiscent of boiled turnips. The walls are cold, the light is dim, and the silence is so absolute you can hear your own heartbeat. It's peaceful, yes. But peace, you will learn, is just another word for monotony stretched thin over decades. Brother Alaric leads you down a narrow corridor, his sandals whispering against the flagstones. He explains the rule of Saint Benedict as if reciting a grocery list. Obedience, poverty, chastity, and a schedule so rigid it makes the stones themselves seem flexible. You will wake before dawn for matins. You will work. You will pray. You will eat sparingly. You will pray some more. You will copy manuscripts until your fingers cramp. You will pray again. And just when you think you might collapse from exhaustion, you will pray one final time before collapsing into a hard, narrow cot that feels like it was designed by someone with a personal grudge against comfort. But for now, in this moment, it all seems noble, holy even. You are choosing a life of purpose, of discipline, of connection to something greater than yourself. What you are not choosing but will receive anyway is a lifetime of chilblains, chronic back pain, and the slowly dawning realization that copying the same Latin psalms over and over again is less a spiritual exercise and more a test of how long a human mind can endure without screaming into the void. As you kneel in the chapel for the first time, the echoes of chanting brothers swelling around you, you think, "This is it. This is where I find meaning. And perhaps you will. But first you will find blisters, hunger, and the unshakable suspicion that God might have a very dry sense of humor. Chapter 2. The Vow of Silence, and Why You'll Break It. Silence, you are told, is sacred. It is the language of the divine, the absence of worldly noise that allows the soul to hear the whispers of God. It is also, as you will soon realize, an unrelenting torment for anyone who has ever had a single thought worth sharing. The first week is bearable. The novelty of quietude lends a certain gravitas to your every movement. You walk with measured steps, hands tucked into your sleeves, face a mask of pious serenity. You nod when spoken to by the abbot, bow when prayers are called, and otherwise exist in a state of dignified muteness. The other brothers seem to move through their days with ease, their lips sealed, their expressions unreadable. You assume they must have achieved some high state of spiritual enlightenment, until you catch Brother Hildebrand making faces at the cat during Vespers. By the second week, the cracks begin to show. The human mind is not built for perpetual quiet. Thoughts pile up like unread scrolls, pressing against the inside of your skull with increasing urgency. You start noticing things you never would have before. The way Brother Alaric's nose whistles when he breathes. The rhythmic tap-tap-tap-y of Brother Cuthbert's fingernail against the refectory table. The fact that no one seems to have informed Brother Godric that beans should not sound like that. By the third week you are ready to scream. But you don't. Because the punishment for breaking the vow of silence is, depending on the severity of the infraction, anything from extra prayers to a week of bread and water penance to, God help you, copying the entire book of Psalms while standing. And so, like generations of monks before you, you get creative. The first breakthrough comes in the scriptorium. You and Brother Oswin are hunched over your respective manuscripts, quills scratching away at the parchment when you catch his eye. He glances at the page you're working on, a particularly tedious passage on the virtues of patience. And then, with the slow, deliberate precision of a man who has done this many times before, he raises one eyebrow. You stare. He does it again, then flicks his gaze meaningfully toward the window, where the sunlight is streaming in with cruel indifference to your suffering. It takes you a moment. Then it clicks. You raise your own brow in question. He nods, ever so slightly. A silent conversation has begun. This is unbearable. And this advana is very in the hand. Yes, es nasally, und in dein to circle me, Kama. Killing the wine, Gibson on the high. Wistenelius is still near this yard. He would rather shovel manure than copy another line. Agent Dophonis. Mundo estadnesi. Besipe the Dayton Phil. Robert Clement got that duty last week. He's still limping. That is 16 Dani. Won't be no down for. By the end of the hour, you've developed an entire lexicon of eyebrow raises, lip twitches, and strategic coughs. It's not quite speech, but it's something. Then, there are the hand signals. These are more dangerous, too obvious, too easily spotted by the ever-watchful eyes of the abbot. But necessity breeds innovation. A tug at the ear means if the soup is especially terrible tonight. A scratch at the wrist means I think Brother Alaric is sleeping again. And most importantly, a tap of 2 fingers against the thigh means meet me in the latrine later. I found a rat, and we need to discuss. And the odds of slatus, did you dear? Of course, the truly desperate resort to writing. Not in the official manuscripts, of course. Those are sacred, and defacing them would earn you a penance so severe you might as well start digging your own grave. No, the real artistry happens in the margins of your personal psalter, in tiny, cramped script that could easily be mistaken for a particularly enthusiastic annotation. Will Brother Godric farted during compline again? Cannot Poman, Hambigati. You Brother Oswin says the abbot's new haircut makes him look like a plucked chicken. And it knows. If I have to eat one more bowl of barley gruel, I will throw myself into the fish pond. It's not much, but it's enough to keep you from losing your mind entirely. And then one day, you break. It happens during none, the midday prayer that always seems to drag on just a little too long. You're kneeling in the chapel, back aching, stomach growling when you hear it. A faint, unmistakable voice squelchy from the direction of Brother Godric. The man has, yet again, fail to control his digestion at the most inopportune moment. Something inside you snaps. You snort. It's not even a full laugh, just a quick, involuntary expulsion of air through your nose. But in the absolute silence of the chapel, it might as well have been a trumpet blast. Every head turns toward you. The abbot's eyes narrow. Brother Godric turns an impressive shade of purple. For one terrible, exhilarating moment, you consider doubling down, laughing properly, throwing your head back and howling at the sheer absurdity of it all. But survival instincts kick in just in time, and you instead press your lips together, widen your eyes in what you hope looks like pious rapture, and point dramatically toward the stained glass window above the altar. A beat of silence. Then, slowly, the brothers turn their gazes upward, half expecting some divine vision. The abbot hesitates, then sighs, and returns to his prayers. Brother Godric exhales in relief county, nomis nobin timthai. Crisis averted. That night, in the privacy of the dormitory, Brother Oswin slips you a scrap of parchment. On it, in tiny, precise letters, are 4 words. It's incredible. Panchikonaguer. Lindeleminis. You smile, tuck the note into your sleeve, and prepare for another day of sacred silence. You won't last a month. Chapter 3. Gregorian Chants, a euphemism for eternal boredom. The first time you hear the Gregorian chants, they sound celestial. The voices of your brothers rise and fall in perfect unison, reverberating through the stone arches of the chapel like echoes from heaven itself. Each note lingers in the air, heavy with devotion, weaving a tapestry of sound so pure it almost moves you to tears. I must, I must, By the 37th time, you would rather be waterboarded. The problem isn't the beauty of the chants. The problem is that they never change. Every day, 7 times a day, without fail, you stand in the same spot, breathe in the same incense-thick air, and sing the same sequences of notes you've sung 1,000 times before. You know them so well you could perform them in your sleep. In fact, you frequently do. Brother Clement, who has been here for 23 years, once confessed, via eyebrow semaphore, that he once chanted the entire Yain Te Deum while sleepwalking. And no one noticed. You believe him. The chants are sacred, of course. They are the heartbeat of monastic life, the unbroken thread connecting you to centuries of devotion. But sacred does not mean interesting. Sacred does not mean you won't find yourself, halfway through Latsk, wondering if you could slip a few notes of Greensleeves into the melody just to see if anyone notices. You don't, of course. But the temptation is always there, humming at the edge of your resolve like a demon whispering in your ear. The horror, however, is the repetition. The same psalms, the same antiphons, the same interminable cycles of liturgical seasons. Advent melts into Christmas, which dissolves into Lent, which drags its corpse through Easter, only to begin again. You start to suspect that time isn't linear in the monastery. It's a wheel, and you're the donkey strapped to it. You try to keep your mind engaged. You count the stones in the ceiling. You recite multiplication tables in your head. You attempt to translate the Latin lyrics into increasingly absurd vernacular. Pange lingua gloriosing becomes sing, tongue, about the guy who won. None of it helps. The breaking point comes during a particularly grueling Ave Vespers, DXD. You're standing there, mouth moving on autopilot, when suddenly, horrifyingly, you realize you've lost track of where you are. Your voice falters. The chant marches on without you. Panic claws at your throat as you scramble to find your place, but the Latin syllables blur together into an incomprehensible mush. You freeze, silent, while the brothers around you drone on like a choir of particularly devout cicadas. Then, a miracle. From the other side of the chapel, Brother Oswin lets out a single, deliberate cough. It's timed perfectly, right before the next verse. Your eyes dart to him, and he gives the tiniest nod. You inhale. You rejoin the chant. Disaster averted. Later, in the shadowy recesses of the cloister, you press a hastily scribbled note into his hand. How did you know? He writes back. Hundreds of thundered 100 times. It's comforting, in a way. Even the most devout monks, the ones who have spent decades in this place, still zone out during chants. Still count the minutes until the next meal. Still dream, however fleetingly, of a world where someone, somewhere, has invented a hymn with a khaki change. And then see. The abbot, of course, remains unmoved. He stands at the front of the chapel, his voice never wavering, his face the picture of divine focus. You used to admire that. Now you're pretty sure he's just better at hiding his boredom. One evening, as you file out of Compline, Brother Godric of the infamous digestive woes bumps into you. His eyes dart around to ensure no one is watching. Then he slips you a scrap of parchment, so small it could have come from a mouse diary. Unfolding it, you find not words, but a crude drawing. It's the abbot, his mouth open in song, with a tiny demon perched on his shoulder, plugging its ears. You stifle a snort, tuck the note into your sleeve, and return to your cell. Tomorrow you will chant again, and again, and again. But for tonight, at least, you are not alone in your suffering. Chapter 4. The Manuscript Misery. They tell you that copying manuscripts is holy work. That with each carefully inked letter, you are preserving the wisdom of the ages, safeguarding knowledge against the ravages of time and barbarians. What they don't tell you is that after 6 hours of hunching over parchment in the dim candlelight of the scriptorium, your spine will resemble a question mark, and your fingers will permanently smell of iron gall ink. The first time you're assigned to copy a manuscript, you feel a surge of pride. This is important work. Sacred work. You select your quill with reverence, test its point against your thumb, and dip it into the inkwell with the solemnity of a priest performing a sacrament. The first stroke glides across the parchment in a perfect, crisp line. You are an artist, a scholar, a conduit for divine truth. By the third page, your wrist is screaming. The scriptorium is not designed for human comfort. The stools are backless, the desks are angled just wrong enough to ensure maximum neck strain, and the only light comes from flickering candles that drip wax onto your work with malicious regularity. The cold seeps into your bones from the stone floor, and the only sound is the endless scratching of quills, and the occasional despairing sigh of a monk who's just realized he's misspelled Dominus for the 7th time. Brother Geraldus, the master scribe, patrols the rows with the vigilance of a hawk. His eyes miss nothing. A blotched letter, a shaky line, the slightest deviation from the approved script. When he pauses behind you, the silence is heavier than the monastery's Lenten bread. You feel his gaze on your work like a physical weight. Then, without a word, he reaches over your shoulder, points to a microscopic flaw in your GNI, and walks away. You spend the next hour attempting to replicate that exact curve, your hand cramping with the effort. The ink is its own special torment. Iron gall ink is a cruel alchemy, a mixture of oak galls, iron sulfate, and what you suspect is actual hatred. It stains everything it touches. Your fingers, your sleeves, the once pristine margins of your manuscript. One careless splash, and suddenly your habit looks like you've been in a knife fight with a squid. Worse, the ink has moods. On good days it flows smoothly. On bad days it clots in the nib, blots the parchment, or, God help you, dries to a crust just as you're finishing a perfect line. The manuscripts themselves are no comfort. Some are fascinating treatises on astronomy, herbals with intricate illustrations, even the occasional racy bit of secular poetry smuggled in between psalms. Most, however, are interminable theological commentaries that make the Gregorian chants seem lively. Today's assignment is the spiritual ladder of divine ascenti, a text so dense you could build a fortress out of it. You're fairly certain the author invented 7 new synonyms for suffering just to make monks miserable. The only reprieve comes from the margins. Officially, embellishments are forbidden unless approved by the abbot. Unofficially, every scribe leaves his mark. Brother Arnulf draws tiny, angry faces in the loops of his letters. Brother Elias hides acrostic insults in his initials. You, inspired by sheer delirium, once doodled a surprisingly accurate sketch of Brother Godric mid-sneeze in the corner of a particularly dull homily. It's still there, unnoticed, a tiny act of rebellion against the crushing weight of orthodoxy. The real challenge is staying awake. The combination of dim light, rhythmic scratching, and the soft Latin muttering of your fellow scribes is more potent than any sleeping draught. You develop a system of pinching your own thigh, rocking slightly on your stool, even holding your breath to stay alert. It works, until the day you wake with a jerk to find your nose an inch from the parchment, a fresh ink blot spreading where your face had landed. Brother Geraldus doesn't say a word. He just slides a fresh sheet of parchment toward you and walks away. The shame burns hotter than the candle flame. By the time the bells ring for vespers, your hand is a gnarled claw. Your back feels like it's been trampled by a donkey, and your eyes are so strained you'd swear the candles have halos. As you shuffle out of the scriptorium, Brother Oswin falls into step beside you. Without breaking stride, he presses something into your palm, a tiny ball of wax. You wait until you're in the relative privacy of the cloister walk to examine it. Inside is a single dried berry, tart and sweet, stolen from the kitchen. It's the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. That night, as you lie on your cot, staring at the ceiling, you flex your aching fingers and wonder how many thousands of letters you'll write before you die here. The thought should depress you. Instead, you find yourself smiling. Because tomorrow, when Brother Geraldus isn't looking, you're going to draw a tiny demon in the margin of Gate's spiritual ladder. And that, at least, is something to look forward to. Chapter 5. The Diet of Bread, Water, and Regret. The first time you sit down to a monastic meal, you tell yourself that austerity is good for the soul. The flat, dense loaf of bread placed before you is a test of humility. The thin, lukewarm broth is a lesson in temperance. The single cup of watered wine is a reminder that earthly pleasures are fleeting. You tear off a piece of bread with solemn reverence, chew slowly, and think pious thoughts about the virtue of simplicity. By the 14th meal, you would trade your soul for a pat of butter. Monastic cuisine operates on a simple principle. If it tastes good, it's probably forbidden. The rule of Saint Benedict explicitly prohibits the eating of meat from 4-legged animals, a decree that would be easier to follow if Brother Godric hadn't once described, in horrifying detail, the roasted pork he'd eaten before taking his vows. You now dream of bacon with the fervor of a mystic experiencing divine visions. Breakfast is the cruelest joke of all. A single piece of dry bread and a cup of water so bland, it makes the bread seem flavorful. The first time you witness Brother Elias dunking his crust in the water to soften it, you assume it's a gesture of desperation. By the third week, you've perfected the technique, treating each soggy bite like a sacrament. Dinner is marginally better, if only because it includes cooked vegetables. Unfortunately, the monastery's cook, Brother Barnabas, seems to believe that flavor is a gateway to sin. His signature dish is a gray, lumpy gruel that clings to the spoon with disturbing tenacity. The brothers refer to it as penance porridge, though whether this is a joke or an official term is unclear. Occasionally, when the abbot isn't looking, someone will slip a pinch of salt into the pot. These moments are remembered in hushed tones for weeks afterward. Fish is served on feast days, but feast is a generous term. The fish is usually salted to the point of petrification, requiring heroic efforts to chew. You suspect this is intentional. By the time you've managed to swallow a bite, you're too exhausted to ask for more. The real torment comes during Lent, when even these meager rations are halved. The rule mandates that monks should abstain from food so as to offer our hunger to God, a sentiment that sounds noble until you're lying awake at midnight, listening to your stomach growl like a demon possessed. At such moments, you'd gladly trade a decade of your afterlife for a single roasted chicken. The refectory is a study in quiet desperation. The vow of silence during meals means no one can complain, but the brothers have developed an elaborate system of meaningful glances and suppressed sighs. Brother Arnulf, who once worked as a baker, has a particular way of staring at his bread that conveys both professional disapproval and profound sorrow. Brother Oswin has mastered the art of pushing his gruel around the bowl in patterns that, if you squint, resemble the face of a screaming man. The kitchen garden is the closest thing the monastery has to a source of joy. Tending the herbs and vegetables is Brother Fidelis, a gnarled old monk who speaks to the plants like they're misbehaving children. Under his care, the garden produces onions so pungent they bring tears to your eyes, a blessed relief from the tedium, and leeks that, when smuggled into the dormitory and eaten raw, taste like the ambrosia of the god. One evening, as you're scrubbing pots in the kitchen, you discover a small cache of honey hidden behind a flour sack. You stare at it, torn between guilt and temptation. Before you can decide, Brother Barnabas appears at your elbow. For a long moment he says nothing. Then, with the solemnity of a man performing a sacred rite, he dips a finger into the honey and hands it to you. The taste is so overwhelming you nearly weep. "You didn't see that," he mutters before shuffling away. That night, as you lie in bed licking the last traces of sweetness from your teeth, you realize something terrible. You're going to dream of honey for weeks. And when you wake, there will be only bread. Always bread. The next morning, as you choke down your dry crust, you catch Brother Oswin's eye across the refectory. He raises an eyebrow in silent question. You respond with the smallest of nods. The message is clear. Tonight you're raiding the kitchen garden. It's not a feast, but it's something. Chapter 6. The Sin of Sloth and the Art of Faking Piety. The first time you fall asleep during prayer, you wake in a panic. Your head had dipped forward just as the abbot was intoning the words of Psalm 119, and for one terrifying moment you imagine yourself exposed before the entire chapter as a fraud, a slothful pretender unworthy of the habit you wear. But when your bleary eyes focus, you realize no one has noticed. The brothers continue chanting, their voices rising and falling in the same monotonous rhythm. The abbot's gaze passes over you without interest. You realize with dawning comprehension, not the first monk to doze off in chapel. This discovery changes everything. In the weeks that follow, you become a student of the subtle art of devotional napping. Brother Arnulf is your unwitting tutor. The way he leans slightly against his choir stall during matins, the precise angle at which he bows his head during long readings, the rhythmic swaying that could be mistaken for pious devotion, but is in fagging the edge of consciousness. You study his techniques with a focus you once reserved for scripture. The key you learn is to never fully surrender to sleep, The body must remain upright, the hands folded in apparent prayer, while the mind drifts in that blessed limbo between wakefulness and dreams. The ideal position involves locking your knees just so, allowing your spine to bear the weight while your muscles relax. The hood of your habit provides additional cover, casting your face in shadow should your eyelids betray you. Brother Oswin demonstrates the advanced technique one evening, during vigils. His lips continue moving in perfect synchronization with the chant long after his breathing has deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep. You watch in awe as he delivers an entire recitation of the Lord's Prayer without once surfacing to consciousness. When you nudge him afterward in admiration, he passes you a scrap of parchment with 3 words: "Practice makes perfect." Of course, not all attempts are successful. Brother Godric's snoring remains the bane of nocturnal prayers, his sudden nasal eruptions scattering the peaceful silence like a stone through stained glass. The abbot has developed a particular glare reserved solely for these interruptions, one that could wither grapes on the vine. Brother Godric, for his part, has cultivated the remarkable ability to immediately snap awake and continue chanting as if nothing occurred, though the redness of his ears betrays his shame. The chapel itself becomes an ally in this quiet rebellion. The pre-dawn chill of matins encourages huddling deeper into one's habit. The monotonous drone of Latin psalms makes for a lullaby more effective than any mother's song. Even the hard wooden choir stalls, so seemingly designed for discomfort, provide just enough support to maintain the illusion of wakefulness while permitting blessed rest. You discover unexpected benefits to this practice. Half asleep, the psalms take on strange new meanings. The valley of the shadow of death becomes the warm darkness behind your eyelids. I lift up mine eyes unto the hills transforms into a desperate struggle to keep your head from drooping. The abbot's sermons, so interminable when fully conscious, pass in pleasant, meaningless waves when received in this twilight state. The true test comes during the summer feast of St. Benedict, when the entire office stretches to twice its usual length. By the 3rd hour, even the most devout brothers are employing subtle measures to stay alert. Surreptitious pinching of thighs, exaggerated signing of crosses, the occasional sharp intake of breath through the nose. Brother Elias has developed an elaborate system of shifting his weight from foot to foot in a pattern so regular it could power a mill. You opt for the classic hood-shielded microsleep, surfacing only for the responses. It's during one of these surfacings that you notice the abbot himself, standing in his place of honor, has his eyes closed. Not in prayerful contemplation, but in the unmistakable heavy-lidded manner of a man fighting sleep. The realization is revolutionary. If even the abbot struggles against sloth, what hope have the rest of you? From that day forward, your relationship with prayer changes. You still doze, of course. Some habits are too precious to abandon, but now with less guilt. When your head nods during compline, you no longer jerk awake in panic. When your chanting slows to a mumble during none, you don't scour the rule for appropriate penance. You simply continue secure in the knowledge that you're participating in a tradition as old as monasticism itself, the holy art of sleeping with your eyes open. One night as you file out of the chapel after a particularly successful session of half-sung, half-dreamed vespers, Brother Oswin falls into step beside you. Without breaking stride or making eye contact, he presses something into your hand. A small cushion, no larger than your palm, stuffed with goose down. You hide it in your sleeve, knowing exactly where it will reside during tomorrow's matins. That night, as you lie in your cell listening to the peaceful snores of your brothers, you offer a genuine prayer of thanks, not for deliverance from sloth, but for the small mercies that make it bearable. Then you close your eyes and sleep the untroubled sleep of the just, or at least the clever. Chapter 7. The Midnight Office, Sleep Deprivation as Divine Punishment. The bell for matins rings at the precise moment when sleep has finally, mercifully claimed you. Its metallic shriek cuts through the dormitory like God's own alarm clock, jerking you from dreams of warm bread and soft beds back to the reality of cold stone and aching joints. For one disoriented moment, you're certain this must be some mistake. Surely you only just lay down? But the darkness outside the narrow window confirms the terrible truth. It's midnight, and the divine office waits for no man's need for rest. Getting out of bed is the first trial. The night air clings to your skin like damp parchment as you fumble for your habit in the blackness. Around you, the other brothers groan and shuffle, a symphony of creaking joints and muffled curses. Someone, probably Brother Godric, trips over a misplaced sandal with a grunt that would be comical if you weren't fighting to keep your own eyes open. The walk to the chapel is a gauntlet of waking nightmares. The torchlit corridors stretch and warp before your sleep-deprived eyes. At one turn, you're certain you see Brother Arnulf walking into a wall before correcting course without breaking stride, an experienced practitioner of this nocturnal march. The cold seeps through your thin soles, but you welcome the discomfort. Pain, at least, keeps you upright. The chapel is freezing. Winter frost creeps across the stained glass, while summer brings only marginally less cruel drafts. Candles flicker like spiteful stars, providing just enough light to make out the psalter, but not enough to banish the shadows that dance at the edges of your vision. This is by design, you suspect. It's harder to sleep when you're shivering. The midnight office begins with a solemnity that would be moving if you weren't fighting to remember your own name. The chant starts low and slow, the Latin syllables stretching like taffy in your addled brain. Domine labia mea. Aperis, you mouth the words by rote, your voice cracking on the high notes. Around you, the choir sounds like a chorus of frogs. Brother Elias's bass rumble, Brother Oswin's reedy tenor, the occasional squeak from young Brother Luke, who hasn't yet grown into his voice. Staying awake becomes a battle of epic proportions. You try everything, pinching your thigh through your habit. Ineffective. Chewing your inner cheek. Painful but temporary. Even the old trick of holding your breath until spots appear. Dangerous but occasionally successful. Brother Geraldus once claimed he kept awake by imagining each psalm verse as a flaming sword to battle the demons of sloth. You try this and nearly concuss yourself when your head snaps forward in unconsciousness. The real veterans have developed more sophisticated techniques. Brother Arnulf maintains a repertoire of subtle stretches disguised as pious gestures. Brother Oswin has mastered the art of leaning just so against his choir stall, appearing deeply contemplative while actually resting most of his weight. The abbot himself employs a terrifying trick of suddenly opening his eyes wide when they begin to droop, giving the impression of divine inspiration rather than desperate wakefulness. Time behaves strangely during these nocturnal vigils. Minutes stretch like years while hours vanish in the blink of a sleep-deprived eye. You're fairly certain the universe actually stops during particularly long readings. You once timed a single amen to last longer than most mortal sunsets. The psalms blend together until you find yourself chanting passages that don't exist, mumbling nonsense Latin that would get you flogged if anyone were awake enough to notice. The breaking point always comes around the third nocturne. This is when hallucinations begin. The shadows in the corner coalesce into spectral monks who chant along with you. The stained glass saints appear to wink. Once you could have sworn you saw Brother Godric floating 3 inches above his seat, though that might have just been wishful thinking. Brother Luke claims he once saw the Virgin Mary knitting in the rafters during a particularly brutal Lenten vigil. No one doubted him. When the office finally blessedly ends, the walk back to the dormitory is a somnambulant procession. Brothers sway like reeds in the wind, their hoods pulled low over faces gray with exhaustion. No one speaks, not just because of the vow of silence, but because forming coherent thoughts requires more energy than anyone can muster. You develop a deep spiritual understanding of why the psalmist compared humans to grass. You too could be cut down and wither at any moment. Back in your cell, sleep should come easily. But the cruel irony of the midnight office is that by the time you're horizontal again, your body has decided this was merely a brief intermission. You lie staring at the ceiling, listening to the symphony of snores around you, counting the moments until lauds will rip you from bed again. In these quiet hours, you contemplate profound theological questions. Did God really intend for men to live like this? Is sleep deprivation truly the path to enlightenment? And most importantly, how does Brother Godric manage to snore through his own nose and mouth simultaneously? Dawn finds you hollow-eyed and twitchy, shuffling through morning prayers with the enthusiasm of a condemned man. The bread at breakfast tastes like ashes, the water like tears. But as you raise your cup in the thin morning light, you notice something miraculous. Brother Oswin, across the refectory, is actually smiling. When he catches your questioning look, he merely taps the side of his nose and gestures upward. Following his gaze, you see the reason for his good mood. Thick rain clouds gathering outside. Rain means no field work. Rain means an extra hour of rest after sext. Rain is, in its way, a small mercy from heaven, proof that even in this life of exhaustion, divine providence occasionally takes pity on mortal weakness. You return the smile, raise your cup in silent toast, and prepare to face another day running on prayer and stubbornness. After all, as Brother Arnulf likes to say, via eyebrow semaphore, eternity is a long time to catch up on sleep. Chapter 8. The Itchy Habit, Wool Robes and Eternal Discomfort. The first time you don the monastic habit, you feel transformed. The coarse wool falls in heavy folds from your shoulders, the scapular draping with dignified weight down your chest, the hood casting your face in appropriately solemn shadow. You stand straighter beneath its rough embrace, imagining yourself part of an ancient tradition, stretching back through centuries of holy men who wore this same uniform of devotion. The novice master nods approvingly as you run your hands over the unfamiliar fabric. The itch reminds us of our earthly suffering, he intones with suspicious serenity. By the third hour, you understand why medieval saints were always depicted looking pained. The monastic habit is not so much clothing as it is a hair shirt with sleeves. The wool, woven by pious hands that apparently confused spirituality with sandpaper quality standards, chafes at every movement. The neckline scratches like a nest of ants has taken up residence beneath your collarbones. The sleeves manage the remarkable feat of being simultaneously too tight at the wrist, and yet constantly in the way during manual labor. And the hood, blessed sanctuary from prying eyes though it may be, has a tendency to flip forward unexpectedly, transforming you from solemn monk to blind beggar mid-prayer. Summer turns the habit into a mobile sauna. The thick wool, perfect for drafty stone cloisters in January, becomes a stifling prison when August arrives. You sweat in places you didn't know could sweat, the salty trails creating new and innovative itching opportunities as you shuffle through afternoon prayers. Brother Barnabas once claimed that a properly worn summer habit could stand upright on its own after Vespers. No one doubted him. Winter brings different torments. The wool, now damp from perpetual chill, takes on the texture of a frozen hedgehog. Every movement sends tiny needles of discomfort radiating across your skin. Static electricity transforms you into a walking lightning rod. You learn to approach metal candle holders with caution after an unfortunate incident during Advent left your eyebrows smoking. The hood, now stiff with frost around the edges, makes turning your head an exercise in medieval chiropractic techniques. The belt presents its own special hell. The rough cord, tied just tight enough to remind you of your vow of poverty, but not so tight as to actually keep your habit from billowing unpredictably, has developed a personal vendetta against your ribs. No matter how you adjust it, within minutes it will have migrated to the exact position that maximizes discomfort while minimizing dignity. Brother Godric once theorized that monastic belts were actually cursed objects designed to test one's patience. His subsequent week of penance for frivolous speculation did little to disprove the theory. Washing the habit is an exercise in futility. The coarse wool emerges from its monthly baptism, looking exactly as it did before, only slightly damper and more resentful. The lye soap strips your hands of feeling, while leaving the fabric's essential itchiness untouched. Brother Fidelis, who oversees the laundry, claims this is because dirt builds character. You suspect Brother Fidelis may be the devil. Sleeping in the habit is its own form of penance. The rule requires you to remain clothed even at night, a dictate you initially assumed was symbolic until your first bedtime. The wool, now warmed by body heat, takes on a life of its own, shifting and wrinkling beneath you like a living thing. Every toss and turn creates new friction points, new opportunities for discomfort, new reasons to question your life choices. You develop a profound sympathy for sheep, who presumably spend their entire lives in this state of perpetual annoyance. The veterans have developed coping mechanisms. Brother Arnulf secretes a small pouch of dried lavender in his sleeve, the scent almost but not quite masking the ever-present aroma of pious perspiration. Brother Oswin has perfected a series of subtle stretches that redistribute the fabric's wrath without breaking decorum. Brother Geraldo simply appears immune, leading to whispered theories that he was born wearing the habit and never noticed the difference. You discover your own solution, quite by accident, during a particularly brutal heat wave. Desperate for relief, you sneak into the kitchen garden and rub a stolen cabbage leaf against your inner arms. The cooling relief lasts just long enough to get through none without scratching your skin raw. Soon, a black market of garden remedies flourishes in the shadowy corners of the cloister. Mint leaves tucked into sleeves, chamomile petals lining belts, even the occasional daring application of kitchen lard to particularly afflicted areas. The abbot, of course, knows. How could he not? But he says nothing, and in his silence you detect a tacit understanding. Even saints probably itched. After all, what is spiritual growth if not learning to suffer gracefully? And so you endure, one scratch at a time, finding small comforts where you can. On particularly trying days, when the wool seems determined to drive you mad, you take secret solace in watching Brother Godric. The man itches with such enthusiasm and lack of subtlety that he makes everyone else look stoic by comparison. His habit has developed permanent wrinkles from constant adjustment. His scapular hangs at a perpetual crooked angle, and his hood looks like it's been through several rounds with a determined cat. One evening, as you both stand scratching discreetly against a convenient doorframe after compline, he catches your eye and shrugs. The message is clear. If this is the price of salvation, at least you're not paying it alone. You nod in agreement, take a deep breath, and prepare to face another night of holy discomfort. After all, as the novice master said, the itch reminds you of earthly suffering. You just wish it didn't remind you quite so often. Chapter 9. The Abbot's Wrath. When God's representative loses his temper, Abbot Bertrand presents himself as the embodiment of holy serenity until someone moves his favorite quill. Then the wrath of the Almighty descends upon the monastery in ways that make plagues of Egypt seem mild by comparison. You learn this lesson the hard way during your first month, when you commit the unforgivable sin of placing his special lectern candle 3 inches to the left of its ordained position. The resulting sermon on the sacred geometry of divine illumination lasts longer than some of the shorter books of the Bible, delivered in a voice that starts at icy calm and builds to thunderous condemnation. By the end, you're half convinced the candle's placement may indeed determine the fate of your immortal soul. The abbot's punishments are legendary in their creativity. Forget simple bread and water penances. Abbot Bertrand's corrections walk the fine line between spiritual discipline and performance art. Brother Luke once yawned during matins and found himself assigned to recite all 150 psalms while standing in the freezing fish pond. Brother Elias accidentally spilled ink on a manuscript and spent a week copying scripture with his wrong hand, while the abbot critiqued each letter like a Roman emperor at the games. The monastery operates on a delicate ecosystem of favors, grudges, and strategic brown-nosing that would make a royal court blush. Brother Geraldos has somehow convinced the abbot that his snoring is a form of spiritual ecstasy, while poor Brother Godric can't so much as glance at the kitchen without being accused of gluttony. The abbot's favorites enjoy extra blankets and prime chapel positions. His disfavored find themselves volunteering for latrine duty with alarming frequency. You navigate these treacherous waters carefully, learning which brothers can be trusted, Brother Oswin, which will sell you out for an extra portion of gruel, Brother Hildebrand, and which are too oblivious to be threats, Brother Godric, bless his simple heart. The key is to never be the most irritating brother at any given moment, a strategy that requires constant vigilance and the occasional sacrifice of throwing Brother Godric under the cart when necessary. The abbot's moods follow mysterious celestial patterns only he understands. A broken seal on the wine cellar might earn a mild rebuke one day and a 3-hour lecture on theology of temperance the next. Brother Arnulf swears the abbot's temper correlates with the phases of the moon, while Brother Oswin maintains it depends entirely on whether his special sitting cushion has been properly fluffed. One rainy Tuesday, you witness the abbot's legendary temper in full force when Brother Barnabas served slightly undercooked bread at supper. What follows is an impromptu chapter meeting where the abbot, with terrifying calm, delivers a point-by-point theological analysis of how gluten development reflects the soul's readiness for communion with God. By the end, even the bread looks chastened. Brother Barnabas spends the next fortnight baking test loaves that are judged with all the solemnity of papal edicts. The abbot's greatest wrath, however, is reserved for challenges to his authority. When a visiting bishop once suggested the monastery's chant tones were unconventional, Abbot Bertrand instituted a week-long singing regimen that left the entire brotherhood hoarse and traumatized. The bishop never commented again. You survive your first year through a combination of strategic invisibility and well-timed flattery. You learn to laugh at the abbot's jokes, but not too loudly, compliment his sermons, but not too effusively, and always, keep a spare vial of his favorite ink on hand. On the day of your solemn profession, when you finally take permanent vows, the abbot places his hands on your shoulders and smiles beatifically. You have learned obedience well, he says, and you feel a rush of pride, until you catch Brother Oswin rolling his eyes behind the abbot's back. That night, as you lie in your cell contemplating a lifetime under this regime, a small scrap of parchment flutters through your window. In Brother Oswin's cramped script it reads, "Welcome to the madness. Don't worry. He's actually mellowed with age." You fall asleep, wondering what could possibly be worse than this, and whether it's too late to fake your own death. The answer, as you'll discover, is yes, but that's a story for another chapter. Chapter 10. The Holy Toil of Latrine Duty. There is no vow of poverty quite so profound as that made by a monk, standing ankle-deep in monastery sewage. Your introduction to this sacred duty comes one crisp autumn morning when Brother Cellarer taps you on the shoulder during prime and hands you a wooden shovel with all the ceremony of a death sentence. "God's work takes many forms," he murmurs, his face carefully neutral as he gestures toward the rickety shed housing the monastery's necessary facilities. The twitch at the corner of his mouth suggests he's fighting either a smirk or a gag reflex. The latrine ditch lies at the far edge of the monastery grounds, strategically downwind from the living quarters, but inconveniently upwind from the kitchen garden. Its design is simplicity itself, a long trench lined with crumbling limestone, perpetually buzzing with flies even in winter, and possessing an aroma that clings to clothing like a vengeful spirit. The brothers refer to it euphemistically as Saint Perpetua's Grotto, though no one can remember which Perpetua this honors, or why she deserved such a dubious tribute. Your first assault on the trench nearly ends your monastic career, before sex. The initial shovel load sends up a greenish-brown cloud of vapors that make your eyes water, and your stomach rebel. Brother Giraldus, passing by on his way to the scriptorium, pauses just long enough to offer helpful advice. Breathe through your mouth. You soon discover this merely allows you to taste the experience more fully. The tools of this blessed trade are medieval torture devices masquerading as cleaning implements. The shovel has a warped handle that ensures each scoop transfers maximum material to your habit. The line bucket has a loose handle that deposits white powder down your front at inopportune moments. The water dipper, used to refresh the trench, has developed an ominous crack that ensures your feet receive as much liquid as the ditch. By noon, you've developed a system. Shallow breaths through a sleeve-filtered mouth, eyes half closed against the stinging air, and a rhythmic scooping motion that minimizes splatter. You also develop several new theories about why medieval saints were always depicted with their eyes raised heavenward. Clearly, they were just trying to spot fresh air. The veterans approach latrine duty with either grim resignation or disturbing enthusiasm. Brother Godric treats it as spiritual exercise, humming hymns while he works, and emerging looking disturbingly serene. Brother Hildebrand sees it as an opportunity to slack. His cleaning consists mostly of rearranging the lime powder into interesting patterns before declaring the job done. Brother Oswin has perfected the art of completing the task with such ruthless efficiency that he's usually back in the cloister before anyone notices he's gone. You quickly learn the hierarchy of monastic waste. Kitchen scraps are merely unpleasant. Chamber pot contents are regrettable. But the true horror comes from the infirmary runoff, where brother infirmarians' questionable herbal remedies mix with sick monks' bodily fluids to create something that should probably be exorcised rather than shoveled. The first time you encounter this unholy brew, you seriously consider whether hell might actually be preferable. The social dynamics of latrine duty reveal much about monastery politics. Brothers in disgrace find themselves assigned to the trench with alarming frequency. Brothers in favor mysteriously develop knee troubles whenever the roster is posted. The abbot himself has never been seen within 50 paces of the facilities, leading to whispered theories that he doesn't actually use them. Rain transforms the trench into a soupy nightmare. Snow makes locating the deposits an adventure in glacial archaeology. Summer heat creates atmospheric conditions best described as apocalyptic. Only in the crisp days of early spring does the task approach anything resembling bearable, and even then the resident flies seem personally offended by your efforts. You develop coping mechanisms. Brother Arnulf taught you the trick of stuffing mint leaves in your nostrils, though this only replaces one smell with another and makes you sneeze lime powder at inopportune moments. Brother Oswin once slipped you a beeswax nose plug which worked beautifully until the abbot asked you a question during chapter, and you responded by loudly inhaling the thing. The true test comes during your first winter assignment when the trench contents freeze into a grotesque landscape of icy stalagmites. Your shovel becomes useless against the frozen mass, requiring the use of an iron-tipped poker normally reserved for fireplace maintenance. The resulting chips of frozen waste fly with alarming accuracy, one particularly well-aimed chunk nearly taking out Brother Cellarer as he makes his rounds. His glare suggests this isn't the first time this has happened. By the time the bells ring for Vespers, you've achieved a kind of exhausted zen. The stench has burned out your nasal passages to the point where you can no longer smell anything. Your habit is stiff with lime and other substances best not examined too closely, and your hands have developed a permanent tremor from hours of clutching the shovel. As you stagger back toward the washhouse, you catch sight of Brother Giraldus emerging pristine from the scriptorium. His nose wrinkles as you pass, and for one delicious moment, you consider embracing him. That night in the dormitory, as you lie scrubbed raw and still faintly aromatic, Brother Oswin slips you a scrap of parchment. "Welcome to the Brotherhood," it reads. "Tomorrow you get to clean the infirmary pots." You fall asleep dreaming of tropical islands, volcanic eruptions, anything that might explain why everything you touch still smells of sulfur. Somewhere in the distance, Brother Godric's contented snores suggest he's dreaming of his next turn at the trench. The man is either a saint or dangerously deranged. Either way, you envy his peace. Chapter 11. The Forbidden Love of Monastic Gossip. The first rule of monastic life is silence. The second, far more important rule, is learning how to break it without getting caught. You discover this truth one rainy afternoon in the cloister garden, where you stumble upon brothers Arnulf and Oswin engaged in what appears to be a particularly intense session of weeding. Their heads are bowed close together, hands moving with deliberate slowness among the rosemary bushes. As you approach, their conversation cuts off abruptly, replaced by the kind of innocent whistling usually reserved for guilty schoolboys. Brother Oswin casually palms something into his sleeve, while Brother Arnulf suddenly develops an intense fascination with a perfectly ordinary patch of time. Later that evening, a folded square of parchment appears beneath your prayer book. Unfurled carefully in the dim light of your cell, it reveals the monastery's true currency, a neatly inked list detailing which brothers snore loudest during compline, complete with musical notation for Brother Godric's nasal symphony. Thus begins your education in the black market of monastic gossip. The abbey thrives on whispered secrets passed through an elaborate system of dead drops and coded gestures. Brother Celibacy's stash of contraband honey is common knowledge, though everyone pretends not to notice the sticky fingerprints on his sleeve. The fact that Brother Giraldus once accidentally copied an entire page of Psalms backward is legend preserved in the margins of a particularly dull theological commentary where generations of monks have added increasingly elaborate embellishments to the story. The scriptorium becomes the beating heart of this underground network. Manuscript margins that should contain pious annotations instead bulge with scandalous asides and crude doodles. A particularly dry passage on penitential rites might feature a tiny sketch of the abbot's face when he discovered someone had used his special lectern candle to light the kitchen fires. The initials, BG followed by a small cloud symbol, appear with suspicious frequency near discussions of flatulence in theological texts. Brother Hildebrand operates as the monastery's least discreet information broker, trading rumors for favors with all the subtlety of a town crier. His dramatic reenactment of Brother Celibacy's infamous honey incident, complete with exaggerated tiptoeing in a stuffed sleeve, has brought more monks to tears than any Lenten sermon. That he hasn't been caught is either a miracle or proof the abbot finds him too entertaining to punish. The most skilled practitioners elevate gossip to an art form. Brother Arnulf can conduct entire conversations through eyebrow movements alone, his expressive brows dancing through complex theological debates and scathing commentary on Brother Giraldus's latest haircut with equal fluency. Brother Oswin has perfected the art of the meaningful cough, using carefully timed throat clearings to punctuate silent meals with unspoken commentary. You learn to interpret the monastery's silent language. A scratch at the left ear means the abbot's in a mood. A slow blink during morning prayer signals Brother Godric forgot to bathe again. The ritual passing of the salt bowl at supper becomes a complex ballet of implications. 3 precise taps means wait until chapter meeting, while an exaggerated swirl of the fingers translates to you won't believe what I just heard. The dormitory after lights out transforms into a veritable marketplace of scandal. Brothers who wouldn't dare break silence by day suddenly become fonts of information, whispering behind raised blankets like conspiratorial children. Here you learn that Brother Celibacy wasn't always so round. His girth apparently dates back to an incident involving stolen marchpane and a distracted kitchen guard. Brother Giraldus's legendary stoicism cracks just once per year on the anniversary of some mysterious ink disaster no one will explain. Even the abbot isn't immune to speculation. His mysterious monthly visits to the bishop's palace spawn increasingly elaborate theories. He's secretly noble, He's being blackmailed over his youthful poetry. He's actually the bishop's illegitimate uncle. Brother Hildebrand's current favorite involves a secret gambling habit and a stolen relic, though this seems unlikely given the abbot's notorious inability to bluff during their rare games of chess. The true masterpiece of monastic gossip, however, is the legend of Brother Ambrose's missing toe. What begins as a simple observation about the old monk's limp soon spirals into an epic tale involving a runaway donkey, a poorly timed vow of silence, and what may or may not have been an exorcism. The story mutates with each retelling, growing more outlandish until even Brother Ambrose seems unsure of the truth. When confronted, he merely smiles beatifically and changes the subject, the mark of a true gossip virtuoso. Your own contributions to this oral tradition begin modestly. A whispered observation about Brother Barnabas's mysterious nighttime activities near the chicken coop. A carefully passed note about the abbot's peculiar hatred of the color yellow. Soon you're trading in premium gossip, like the time you caught Brother Giraldus actually smiling at a particularly well-drawn marginalia, or your discovery that Brother Godric secretly composes love poems to the monastery's fattest hen. The system isn't perfect. Every few months, some hapless novice gets caught mid-whisper and spends a week copying psalms while standing on one leg. Brother Hildebrand's dramatic reenactments occasionally go too far, resulting in penances that only fuel further speculation. And there's always the risk that your carefully passed note might fall into the wrong hands, as you discover when your scathing critique of Brother Cellerer's new haircut somehow ends up pinned to the chapter house door. But for all its risks, the gossip network serves a vital purpose. In a world of silence and routine, these whispered secrets and shared jokes become the thin threads holding sanity together. When you pass Brother Oswin in the cloister and exchange the secret eyebrow flick that means wait until you hear what Brother Godric did now, you're not just breaking rules. You're remembering that beneath the habits and the solemn chants, you're all just human, even if some humans are significantly more ridiculous than others. Chapter 12. The Illusion of Peace. Monastery Raids and Bandit Fears. You join the monastery believing it to be an island of tranquility in a violent world, until your first raid drill shatters that illusion with the subtlety of a warhammer. The alarm comes during Compline, just as Brother Godric hits that one nasal note in the Magnificat that always makes Brother Giraldus twitch. A single frantic clang of the warning bell sends the choir into chaos faster than any of Brother Hildebrand's gossip. The abbot's voice cuts through the sudden panic like a blade, his practiced command sending monks scattering to predetermined positions with surprising efficiency. Within moments, the illusion of peaceful devotion gives way to the reality of medieval survival. Brother Arnulf, surprisingly spry for a man who dozes through most offices, shoves a heavy wooden bar into your hands and points you toward the scriptorium doors. Hold this until someone tells you otherwise, he hisses before disappearing down the cloister at a pace that would shame a man half his age. You stand there, clutching the bar like a sacred relic, suddenly aware that no one actually explained what you're supposed to do if real bandits come crashing through those doors. The monastery's defenses are equal parts impressive and absurd. The outer walls stand thick enough to repel casual attacks, yet the main gate hasn't closed properly since Brother Godric tried to reinforce it with some extra wood during his brief carpentry phase. The storerooms boast an elaborate system of hidden compartments for protecting the most valuable manuscripts. Yet everyone knows Brother Cellerer's best wine is stashed under a loose flagstone near the lavatorium. As you wait in your assigned position, the scriptorium takes on an eerie quality in the flickering torchlight. Shadows dance across the carefully copied manuscripts, making the marginal doodles seem to move. A particularly unflattering sketch of the abbot appears to glare at you from the edge of a psalter. Somewhere in the distance you hear what might be Brother Godric tripping over his own sandals again, or possibly the first wave of attackers. Brother Oswin materializes beside you, his normally composed face taut with tension. He presses a cold, heavy object into your free hand, the scriptorium's prized bronze inkwell, repurposed as an improvised weapon. The silent message is clear. If it comes to it, you're expected to bludgeon intruders with the tools of your trade. You briefly wonder if there's a theological precedent for killing a man with liturgical poetry before realizing this is exactly the sort of question Brother Giraldus would love, and now might never get to answer. The drill lasts an eternity measured in pounding heartbeats and strained whispers. Monks you've only ever seen moving at a solemn processional pace now dart through the cloisters with alarming agility. Brother Barnabas, normally so slow and methodical in the kitchen, appears suddenly at your side wielding a meat cleaver with disturbing familiarity. Even Brother Hildebrand abandons his usual theatrics, his face uncharacteristically serious as he helps barricade the refectory doors. Just as you begin to seriously contemplate what bandits might want with a bunch of sleep-deprived scribes, the all-clear sounds. The single bell tone reverberates through the stones beneath your feet, followed by the collective exhale of 30 men who didn't realize they'd been holding their breath. Later, in the relative safety of the chapter house, the abbot explains, with the weary patience of a man who's given this speech too many times, that the neighboring villages have reported bandit activity. There's no immediate danger, but prudence demands preparation. Brother Giraldus nods along solemnly, though you notice his fingers twitching toward his ever-present quill, no doubt already drafting a strongly worded letter to the bishop about proper monastic defense funding. As the monks disperse to their cells, the usual nighttime quiet carries a new tension. Every creak of aged wood becomes a stealthy invader, every owl's cry a signal between thieves. Brother Arnulf's legendary snoring takes on new menace, each rasping breath sounding like a saw working at the cloister doors. You lie awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling and contemplating the uncomfortable truth that even holy men must sometimes think about violence. The bronze inkwell sits heavy under your pillow, its smooth surface now indelibly linked in your mind with both sacred texts and potential skull fractures. Somewhere in the darkness, a floorboard creaks, just Brother Godric making his nightly pilgrimage to the latrine, but your grip tightens around the makeshift weapon anyway. When sleep finally comes, it brings dreams of illuminated manuscripts with armed initials, of psalms that rhyme with siege tactics, of an abbot who leads Sunday Mass in full chainmail. You wake to the dawn bell with a start, momentarily disoriented until you see the familiar scratch marks on your cell wall. Brother Oswin's way of tracking how many days until the next feast day. Over breakfast, bread slightly burnt from Brother Barnabas's distracted baking, you notice the subtle changes the drill has wrought. Brothers who normally avoid eye contact now exchange knowing nods. The usual morning gossip carries a new edge, stories of raids on distant monasteries passed along with the butter. Even Brother Godric seems more alert, though this may just be because someone finally told him the drills weren't elaborate liturgical performances. As you file into prime, the familiar chants take on new meaning. Protect us from the snares of the enemy suddenly feels less metaphorical. When Brother Giraldus stumbles over the Latin, no one makes the usual marginal notes about it. There are more important things to think about now than grammatical errors. By midday, the routine begins to reassert itself. The hidden compartments are checked and rechecked, the wine stash quietly relocated, the abbot's special lectern candle returned to its exact prescribed position. Life in the monastery goes on, just as it has for centuries, through wars, plagues, and the occasional poorly planned carpentry project. But that night, as you kneel for compline, you find yourself listening not just to the words of the Psalms, but to the sounds beyond them. The creak of the cloister doors, the whisper of habits against stone, the distant cry of a fox that might just be a fox. And when Brother Godric hits that one nasal note, for once no one minds at all. Chapter 13. The Herbal Remedies that made things worse. Brother Infirmarian's medicine cabinet looks like the contents of a witch's pantry exploded in a small wooden cupboard. Jars of suspicious powders jostle for space with vials of murky liquids, dried things that might be herbs or possibly someone's forgotten lunch. and at least one unsettlingly large leech preserved in what you hope is wine. Yuri, Ricino. The air hangs thick with the competing aromas of mint, something faintly sulphurous, and an underlying note of despair. Your introduction to monastic medicine comes when a particularly enthusiastic sneeze during matins catches the abbot's attention. By prime, you find yourself lying on the infirmary's questionable cot, while Brother Infirmarian peers into your nostrils with the intensity of a man searching for lost treasure. "Ah," he pronounces with grave satisfaction, "the humors are clearly imbalanced." Before you can ask which humors and why they're angry, he's mixing a paste of something green and pungent that will haunt your dreams for weeks. The monastic approach to healing rests on three unshakable pillars: bloodletting for everything, herbs that may or may not be poisonous, and absolute confidence in the face of contradictory evidence. Brother Infirmarian moves through his work with the serene certainty of a man who's never let a little thing like patient outcomes shake his faith in ancient Greek medical texts. The bloodletting ceremony is an experience you'll never forget, though not for the reasons Brother Infirmarian intends. The leeches arrive in a special jar, their slick bodies undulating in a way that makes your own skin crawl in sympathy. These are the finest English leeches, he assures you as one attaches itself to your arm with unsettling enthusiasm, very discerning about which humors to remove. You try not to wonder about the French leeches and why they're apparently inferior as you watch your blood disappear into a creature that seems to be judging you. When the leeches fail to cure your sniffles, though they do succeed in making you faint, Brother Infirmarian moves on to phase 2, the poultice. What follows is a foul-smelling concoction of herbs, honey, and something he refers to only as special ashes that get smeared across your chest with the delicacy of a mason plastering a wall. The mixture seeps into your habit, bonding with the wool to create a permanent medicinal crust that will make you vaguely sticky for months. The true horror comes at night, when Brother Infirmarian's tonic makes its appearance. The dark brown liquid swirls ominously in its flask, releasing bubbles that pop with audible menace. One sip before bed, he instructs, watching you with the eager anticipation of a man who enjoys his work too much. The flavor defies description, though damp cellar and angry weeds feature prominently in your immediate assessment. Its effects are equally memorable. Within minutes, your stomach wages open rebellion while your head floats several feet above your body. You spend the night in a strange limbo between prayer and hallucination, convinced at one point that the leeches have formed a choir and are singing the Dies Irae. The other brothers regard the infirmary with varying degrees of terror. Brother Oswin would apparently rather die than submit to another of Brother Infirmarian's cleanses, a sentiment carved into the dormitory wall above his bunk. Brother Godric, ever the exception, seems to enjoy the attention and frequently volunteers for experimental treatments. His current record is 7 leeches at once, a feat that earned him both a stern lecture from the abbot and what appears to be a permanent twitch in his left eyelid. You learn to identify veteran monks by their infirmary survival strategies. Brother Arnulf has perfected the art of appearing just healthy enough to avoid treatment, but not so healthy as to arouse suspicion. Brother Geraldus maintains his own secret stash of real medicine, smuggled in by his noble cousin, though he guards it more carefully than the monastery's relic collection. Brother Hildebrand, in a moment of either bravery or stupidity, once told Brother Infirmarian his cure was worse than the disease, and subsequently spent a month on latrine duty as penance for undermining monastic unity. The herb garden is Brother Infirmarian's pride and joy, though its contents seem better suited to poisoning rivals than healing the sick. Rows of innocent-looking plants conceal terrifying potentials, innocuous mint neighbors with something called devil's bit, while cheerful yellow flowers turn out to be a potent laxative waiting to happen. Brother Fidelis tends the garden with nervous devotion, his usual plant whispering replaced by hushed apologies as he harvests leaves for the next round of suffering. Your second visit to the infirmary comes sooner than expected when the poultice rash develops its own rash. Brother Infirmarian greets this development with disturbing enthusiasm, diagnosing purgation of secondary humors before breaking out a new jar of something that smells like fermented despair. The treatment involves strips of linen soaked in vinegar and what might be ground up snails, applied with enough pressure to make you question your life choices. As the burning sensation spreads across your chest, you find yourself longing for the simple agony of the leeches. By your third year in the monastery, you develop your own survival strategies. A well-timed cough during inspection can get you out of the worst treatments, though overuse risks being branded a malingerer. Strategic donations to the infirmary, a nice quill here, a stolen honey cake there, can earn you the less horrifying remedies. And when all else fails, there's always the time-honored tradition of fleeing to the scriptorium and claiming urgent scribal work. Brother Geraldus may be terrifying, but he's never made anyone drink something that glowed in the dark. The breaking point comes during a particularly brutal winter, when Brother Infirmarian unveils his masterpiece. The Four Thieves Vinegar, so named because it supposedly protected medieval plague doctors from infection. Its aroma alone could peel paint from the chapel walls, and its taste lingers in the mouth like a vengeful spirit. When forced to administer it to the entire monastery during a cold outbreak, the resulting chorus of gagging nearly drowns out the Compline bells. Even Brother Godric hesitates before drinking, a first in monastic history. That night, as you lie in your cell still tasting something between rancid garlic and existential dread, a small scrap of parchment flutters through your window. Brother Oswin's precise script reads, "Next time, fake your own death." You fall asleep plotting how to make this happen, your dreams haunted by singing leeches and Brother Infirmarian's disturbingly cheerful smile. Somewhere in the distance, Brother Godric's contented snores suggest he's dreaming of his next experimental treatment. The man is either the holiest among you or should be studied as a medical curiosity himself. Chapter 14. The Eternal Chill. Why monasteries were always freezing. There comes a point in every monk's life when he accepts the cold as his constant companion. Not just the seasonal chill of winter, but that special bone-deep monastic cold that lingers in the stones like a vengeful spirit, seeping into sandals and habits and souls with equal persistence. Your first winter in the monastery begins innocently enough. The first frost dusts the cloister walk with a picturesque shimmer, the kind illuminators might gild into a manuscript's margins. By the time the 12th frost has transformed the washing trough into an ice block, you begin to understand why Brother Arnulf moves through Advent like a man walking to his execution. The architecture of a monastery, so perfectly designed for spiritual contemplation, turns out to be equally perfect for channeling every possible draft into a single focused stream of frigid air. The vaulted ceilings that amplify chants also hoard cold in their shadowy heights. The beautiful arched windows direct icy breezes with the precision of a master archer. Even the flagstones seem to actively leach warmth from your feet, leaving toes numb by the end of prime. The chapel is the cruelest joke of all, a cavernous space where breath hangs visible before dawn prayers, where the cold seems almost sanctified by its persistence. Your first winter matins leave you with chattering teeth, and the distinct impression that the saints in their stained-glass windows are laughing at you. Brother Geraldus, ever the traditionalist, insists this discomfort is spiritually beneficial. The cold purifies, he intones, his nose reddening with each word. You note he says this while wearing an extra layer of stolen parchment beneath his habit. Sleeping arrangements resemble a bizarre devotional exercise in shared body heat. The dormitory, another masterpiece of medieval refrigeration, features carefully spaced beds just far enough apart to prevent meaningful warmth transfer. The single brazier at the room center glows with all the enthusiasm of a dying saint, its heat vanishing before reaching the outer beds where novices sleep. Brother Godric, by virtue of seniority, has claimed the spot nearest the coals, a fact resented by all, especially when his snoring reaches its winter crescendo. You develop coping mechanisms. The first is strategic huddling, waiting until Brother Dormitory's back is turned before scooting beds just close enough to share warmth, without technically violating the rule. The second involves the careful application of stolen kitchen towels as makeshift foot wraps, though this carries the risk of Brother Barnabas recognizing his linens. The third, perfected by Brother Oswin, is the art of sleeping while sitting upright in chapel, using the hood of your habit as a personal tent to trap precious body heat. The cold reshapes monastic routines in unexpected ways. The sign of peace during Mass becomes less a spiritual greeting than a desperate grasp for warm fingers. The washing of feet on Holy Thursday turns into a genuine act of charity rather than ritual symbolism. No one should face the lavatorium's icy waters alone. Even the vow of silence bends under winter's pressure, as brothers develop an elaborate system of meaningful shivers and chattering teeth to communicate discomfort levels. Brother Shalara's winter wine ration becomes the closest thing the monastery has to central heating. The thin, sour vintage takes on new value when sipped slowly during evening readings, its alcohol content just high enough to create the illusion of warmth. The careful negotiation of extra portions fuels more intrigue than any theological debate, with brothers trading favors and secrets for an additional half-cup. Brother Hildebrand once sold information about Brother Geralda's secret parchment stash for an entire flask, a transaction everyone pretends not to remember come spring. The scriptorium transforms into a battleground of frozen fingers and congealed ink. Your quill hand develops a permanent tremor, turning once neat letters into jagged scrawls that Brother Geraldus examines with deepening despair. The ink freezes if left unattended, requiring constant warming against your body, a practice that leaves your habit speckled with enough colors to rival a stained glass window. Brother Oswin has taken to copying texts while wearing gloves stolen from the laundry, though this does little to prevent the stiff, claw-like cramping that sets in by terse. Winter liturgy takes on special torments. The metal paten stings bare hands during communion. The holy water font develops an icy crust that cracks ominously when touched. Even the censer seems reluctant to swing, its chains stiff with cold, until the coals finally warm it midway through Mass. You begin to suspect the real reason monks stand, for so much of the office is that the benches have frozen to an unbearable temperature. The veteran street winter has both trial and badge of honor. Brother Arnulf tells increasingly elaborate stories of winters past, the great freeze of his novitiate when the wine froze in its casks, the icy Lent when the abbot allowed 2 braziers in chapel, the legendary frost of '89 that supposedly preserved Brother Godric's sneeze in midair until Easter. His tales grow taller with each retelling, though no one dares call him on it. Winter is long, and stories are cheap warmth. By your 3rd winter, you've learned the true monastic arts, how to sleep in layers without violating the simplicity of your habit, which stones in the cloister walk absorb the most afternoon sun, the exact moment when newly baked bread can be smuggled into your sleeves as hand warmers. You develop a 6th sense for drafts, flinching before particularly cruel gusts find their way up your sleeves. Your nose runs perpetually, a fact everyone politely ignores. The breaking point comes during a brutal February cold snap, when the chalice freezes to the altar cloth during Mass. As Brother Sacristan attempts to pry it loose with trembling hands, the abbot, normally so strict about liturgical precision, simply sighs and motions for everyone to huddle closer to the single functioning brazier. The usual divisions of rank and seniority collapse in the face of shared suffering. Even Brother Geraldus scoots over, to make room for novices. That night, as you lie in your bed wrapped in every scrap of fabric you could discreetly acquire, Brother Oswin slips you a small warm stone wrapped in wool. It's been heated near the kitchen fires, a contraband comfort that could earn both of you penance if discovered. You clutch it to your chest like a relic, its fading warmth more precious than any indulgence. Somewhere in the distance, the monastery's bells ring for matins, their tones crisp in the frozen air. You rise with the others, your breath pluming in the moonlight as you shuffle toward the chapel for another pre-dawn service. The stones beneath your feet radiate their eternal chill. The drafts find their way through every seam of your habit, and the knowledge that spring will eventually come feels more like article of faith than meteorological certainty. But for now, there's the small warmth of the stolen stone in your sleeve, the shared suffering of your brothers, and the grim satisfaction of knowing you've survived this far. The cold may win every battle, but somehow, through sheer stubbornness and the occasional sin against the rule, the monks endure to see another Lent. And after all, as Brother Arnulf likes to say between chattering teeth, suffering builds character. Though at this point he would happily trade some character for a decent pair of wool socks. Chapter 15. The Secret Rebellion. Hidden tavern visits and stashed wine. There exists a particular shade of red that only appears on a monk's face when he has just been caught sinning. Not the deep crimson of shame, nor the bright flush of anger, but the sickly, mottled hue of a man who has been discovered with a stolen wineskin hidden in his soul. You become intimately familiar with this color the first time Brother Cellarer catches you lingering a little too long near the storeroom, your sleeves suspiciously heavy with contraband figs. The rule of Saint Benedict is clear on matters of gluttony and excess. The monastery's cellar is locked, its keys guarded with more zeal than the sacrament. The abbot's sermons on temperance could make a grapevine wither from abstinence. And yet, despite threats of damnation, despite the watchful eyes of the most pious brothers, despite the fact that Brother Godric once suffered 3 weeks of penance for being caught with a particularly succulent plum, the black market of monastic indulgence thrives. The first secret of rebellion is learning who to trust. Brother Oswin becomes your unlikely partner in crime when you catch him discreetly, spiking his watered wine with honey during a particularly dull chapter meeting. His eyebrow lift in response is all the confirmation you need. This is a man who understands the delicate balance between piety and pleasure. Brother Arnulf, despite his outward gruffness, turns out to have an encyclopedic knowledge of every hiding spot in the cloister, having spent 50 years perfecting the art of smuggling extra bread from the kitchen. Even Brother Geraldus, the terror of the scriptorium, has a weakness for candied ginger, though he would flay anyone alive for suggesting it. The methods of procurement are as varied as the monks themselves. The kitchen, under Brother Barnabas' distracted watch, becomes a treasure trove for those willing to risk it. A snatched handful of raisins here, a wedge of cheese tucked into a sleeve there. The real prize, however, is the wine cellar, whose lock responds suspiciously well to certain bent pins. Not that anyone would admit to trying. Brother Cellarer, for all his vigilance, cannot be everywhere at once, and his habit of napping after sext creates a predictable window of opportunity. The tavern in the nearby village becomes the stuff of legend. Officially, no monk sets foot there. The abbot would sooner allow dancing bears in the chapel than permit such debauchery. Unofficially, at least half the brothers know exactly how much a tankard of ale costs, and which bench creaks least under the west window. Discretion is paramount. Habits are left folded in the woods, secular cloaks are borrowed and returned eventually, and fake names are invented with all the creativity of men who spend their days copying Latin texts. You become Martin the scribe for one glorious evening, nursing a mug of something dark and bitter while listening to actual laughter for the first time in months. Back within the monastery walls, the hiding places grow increasingly ingenious. Hollowed-out books in the library conceal dried fruit. The loose stone near the lavatorium swallows small flasks of spiced wine. Brother Oswin's most brilliant innovation is the false-bottomed inkwell. its lower chamber just large enough for a finger's dip of honey on desperate days. The cemetery, ironically, becomes the safest place to indulge. No one lingers long enough among the graves to notice a brother discreetly nibbling stolen marchpane behind a yew tree. The near misses are frequent enough to keep the thrill alive. Brother Cellara's sudden appearance in the kitchen garden sends a half-eaten sausage flying into the rosemary bushes. The abbot's unexpected inspection of the dormitory sends 3 brothers scrambling to hide evidence of their fig feast beneath their straw mattresses. Worst of all is the time Brother Giraldus nearly opens the wrong psalter during chapter meeting, unaware that its gutted pages contain not prayers but Brother Arnulf's private stock of candied walnuts. The elderly monk's sudden coughing, fit to distract him, enters Monastery legend. Punishments for those caught are creative and humiliating. Brother Godric's plum transgression earned him a week of copying the Book of Proverbs while standing in the refectory, where everyone could watch him sweat. Brother Hildebrand's ill-advised attempt to brew his own ale in the lavatorium resulted in a month of cleaning said lavatory with his own toothbrush. The unnamed brother, rumored to be a young brother Giraldus, who once returned from the village singing loudly, spent Lent wearing a hair shirt so itchy it made the habit feel like silk in comparison. The irony is that no one actually wants to break the rule. Not really. The stolen treats are less about gluttony than about maintaining sanity, about carving out tiny moments of pleasure in a life designed to strip them away. When you share a smuggled honey cake with Brother Oswin behind the stable, passing it back and forth like sinners at communion, it is not the taste you cherish so much as the shared conspiracy, the brief escape from perpetual discipline. The abbot, of course, knows. How could he not? His occasional blind eyes and sudden changes of route suggest a man all too familiar with human weakness, perhaps even nostalgic for his own novice rebellions. His punishments, while strict, are rarely cruel, a wink of understanding that even the holiest of men sometimes crave a bite of cheese past bedtime. The true danger comes not from authority, but from one's own conscience. There are nights when you lie awake, the aftertaste of stolen wine sour in your mouth, wondering if these small sins outweigh your devotion. Then Brother Godric lets out a particularly stentorian snore. Brother Arnulf mutters something obscene in his sleep, and you remember, these are not angels in wool, but men. Flawed, hungry, weak-willed men doing their best to serve God without completely abandoning the small joys that make the service bearable. Your greatest rebellion comes on the eve of your solemn profession, when the entire monastery gathers to celebrate your permanent commitment to the rule. As the others file off to comply, you linger just long enough to slip a small flask of good wine, the abbot's own, borrowed without asking, and 2 cups into your sleeves. Behind the scriptorium, under a moon bright enough to feel complicit, you and Brother Oswin toast your future, not to sin, not to excess, but to the understanding that even the strictest rules cannot erase human nature. The wine is sweet, the night is cold, and for once no one is watching. It's perfect. Right up until Brother Cellara's distinctive cough sounds from the nearby shadows. You freeze, cups halfway to your lips, caught in the act. But the expected reprimand never comes. Only the retreating shuffle of sandals on stone and perhaps the faintest chuckle on the wind. Some rules, it seems, are made to be bent. Just a little. Just enough to keep a man from breaking entirely. Chapter 16. The Curse of Celibacy. Dreams of a life unlived. The irony of monastic chastity is that you spend your days surrounded by the most achingly romantic art ever created while swearing an oath to never experience so much as a chaste kiss. The Virgin Mary gazes beatifically from every other fresco, her serene beauty a constant reminder of the feminine grace you've forsaken. Illuminated manuscripts brim with scenes of courtly love, knights swooning over silk-clad ladies, their longing preserved in jewel-toned inks that seem to mock your vow. Even the psalms drip with erotic longing, when read by a lonely monk after dark. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you. My God takes on troubling new dimensions at midnight. You take your vow of celibacy seriously, of course. The ceremony is solemn, your voice steady as you renounce worldly pleasures forever. The abbot's approving nod warms you like a benediction. That night, you dream of a woman's hands braiding your hair by firelight. You wake in a cold sweat, the echo of her laughter lingering like incense in your cell. Brother Giraldus claims carnal temptation fades after a decade or two. Brother Arnulf snorts into his beard at this, muttering something about old liars just loud enough to be heard. The truth is, desire doesn't disappear. It just learns to walk quietly, like a cat burglar in the cloister after curfew. It hides in the curve of a well-turned psalm verse, in the warmth of sunlight on your back during manual labor, in the occasional brush of fingers when passing the sack. Small things, harmless things, until suddenly they're not. The scriptorium becomes dangerous territory. What should be sacred texts are riddled with temptation. The Song of Songs, practically pornographic in its lush imagery, Augustine's Confessions vibrating with remembered passion, even the lives of saints brimming with suspiciously ecstatic encounters. You develop a nervous tic of glancing around before turning certain pages, as if the other scribes might see the flush creeping up your neck. Brother Giraldus catches you lingering too long on an illuminated capital depicting Adam and Eve, and assigns you a week of copying dietary laws. The punishment fits the crime with uncomfortable precision. Seasonal changes wreak havoc on your resolve. Spring arrives with its earthy smells and birdsong, making your body hum with instincts older than the rule. Summer's heat lingers on bare forearms during harvest, the brush of another monk's shoulder against yours suddenly electric. Autumn's melancholy whispers of hearth, and home and hands to hold. Even winter's chill becomes perverse temptation, the body's desperate craving for warmth translating all too easily into fantasies of shared blankets. The veterans develop coping mechanisms. Brother Arnulf channels his energy into viciously pruning the rose bushes until they tremble at his approach. Brother Giraldus sublimates through increasingly elaborate penmanship, his flourishes so intricate they border on indecent. Brother Oswin, disturbingly, seems to have made peace with his vow, though you once caught him gazing a beat too long at the baker's daughter when she delivered bread. Only Brother Godric appears genuinely untouched by desire. His greatest passion remains the monastery's fattest chicken, whom he serenades with alarming devotion. Night is the cruelest time. The dormitory echoes with sighs and rustling straw, the occasional bitten-off groan that could mean anything but definitely means one thing. You learn which brothers take cold baths before bed, which ones volunteer for extra vigils, which ones you suspect sneak into the lavatory with suspicious regularity. No one speaks of it. The silence grows thick with things unsaid, until even Brother Hildebrand's usual bawdy jokes dry up. The dreams are the worst. Your sleeping mind, freed from daylight discipline, conjures embarrassingly specific fantasies. A milkmaid's strong hands from your youth reappears with troubling frequency, though in your dreams she's acquired theological knowledge and a disturbing tendency to explain transubstantiation while undoing her bodice. You wake tangled in your habit, torn between guilt and longing, grateful for the pre-dawn darkness that hides your shame. Confession becomes an exercise in creative circumlocution. I have entertained impure thoughts covers multitudes, though the more inventive brothers find ways to make even this admission into performance art. Brother Hildebrand once spent 15 minutes describing his temptation by a particularly shapely pear before the abbot cut him off. Brother Godric, bafflingly, confesses weakly to lustful feelings toward Brother Cellerer's ledger, though whether this is actual fetish or profound misunderstanding remains unclear. The monastery's strict segregation from women creates its own perverse effects. After 3 years without seeing a female face, you nearly faint when a noblewoman visits to commission a prayer book. The scent of her perfume, just bergamot and lavender really, leaves you light-headed. The way her veil catches the light as she turns becomes the subject of midnight meditations for weeks. Brother Giraldus assigns you to copy Proverbs 31, a wife of noble character who can find, for a month afterward, his smirk barely concealed. Ironically, it's the art you create that becomes your undoing. A simple capital D for a Psalter grows vines that curl sensuously around the margin. The virgin's face in an illumination somehow acquires the milkmaid's knowing smile. Even your most pious compositions develop a troubling lushness, the colors too vibrant, the lines too flowing. Brother Giraldus peers at your latest work with narrowed eyes, then assigns you to illustrate the Book of Job for balance. The crisis comes during Easter Vigil, when the combination of incense, chanting, and sleep deprivation produces an alarming spiritual, physical ecstasy. As the choir hits the highest note of the exultet, you're suddenly overwhelmed by a sense of union so profound it borders on erotic. The line between divine and human love blurs terrifyingly in that moment, leaving you trembling at the altar rail. Brother Oswin finds you afterwards staring blankly at a stained glass window, hands shaking. He says nothing, just presses a cold mug of water into your grasp and sits beside you in companionable silence. By your 5th year, something shifts. The sharp edge of longing dulls into something more manageable, a background hum rather than a screaming need. You still dream, still catch yourself admiring the curve of a well-drawn letter, still sometimes take an extra lap around the cloister when the baker's daughter visits. But it's quieter now, this hunger, folded into your being like a Psalter's hidden illustration, always there, but only visible when you choose to seek it. The abbot, during your annual confession, listens to your stammered admissions with unexpected gentleness. "The fire never goes out," he murmurs, more to himself than to you. "We just learn to cook on it." His penance is light, 3 days of extra prayers, a reminder that even Christ was tempted. You leave the confessional feeling both chastened and strangely comforted. That night, as you lie listening to the monastery's familiar chorus of snores and rustling straw, you realize something startling. You're happy. Not the ecstatic happiness of your dreams, but a quieter, steadier joy. The peace of the midnight office, the satisfaction of a well-turned phrase, the comfort of Brother Oswin's silent solidarity. These things have become their own kind of love, no less real for being chaste. When the milkmaid visits your dreams again, she smiles, but makes no move to undo her bodice. Instead, she hands you a quill and fades away, leaving you to your work. You wake with ink-stained fingers and a strange lightness in your chest. The dawn bell rings, calling you to prayer, to community, to this complicated life you've chosen. You rise, fold your dreams away like a precious manuscript, and go to meet your brothers in the chapel. The vow holds. For today, at least, it's enough. Chapter 17, the final irony. Death and the monastic graveyard. The first time you bury a brother, you're struck by the efficiency of it all. No grand monuments, no lengthy epitaphs, just a simple shroud and a rectangular hole in the cold earth, exactly 3 feet wide. The rule, naturally, specifies this measurement with the same precision it demands for psalmody and soup thickness. Even in death, it seems, monks cannot escape uniformity. Brother Ambrose goes first, his ancient body finally surrendering to a winter cough during your 3rd year. The grave digging is its own special penance. The frozen soil resists your shovel with the same stubbornness Ambrose once showed toward liturgical innovations. By the time the hole meets the abbot's exacting specifications, your blisters have blisters, and you've developed a newfound respect for the monastery's long-dead masons. The funeral itself is a model of monastic restraint. No wailing mourners, no extravagant displays of grief, just 30 men chanting the office of the dead while secretly calculating how soon they can get back to the marginally warmer chapel. Brother Giraldus delivers a homily emphasizing Ambrose's perfect obedience to the horarium. tactfully omitting his legendary napping skills, and that time he hid an entire sausage in his sleeve during Lent. The burial shroud presents another exercise in holy minimalism, plain, undyed wool, identical to every other shroud in monastery history. The abbot himself insists on folding the edges just so, demonstrating the same attention to detail he once applied to chastising Brother Godric for snoring. As Ambrose's body disappears beneath a shovelful of dirt, you can't help but notice how the rough wool looks exactly like the scratchy habits you all still itch in daily. Some jokes, it seems, persist beyond the grave. The cemetery itself is a masterclass in organized anonymity. Row upon row of identical mounds march toward the yew tree, like a particularly somber chant. Only small stone markers distinguish one from another, their inscriptions so modest they barely count as graffiti. For Lucas OB 123, says one, its letters worn smooth by centuries of rain. No mention of whether this Lucas was the brother who famously slept through a Viking raid, or the one who invented that surprisingly good dandelion wine. History, like the rule, favors conformity over personality. You learn quickly that monastic graveyard duty is less about honoring the dead than maintaining the illusion that death hasn't completely disrupted the schedule. Graves must be dug between terce and sext, burials scheduled after none but before vespers, and absolutely no mourning may interfere with the abbot's precious lectern candle lighting. When Brother Arnulf grumbles that his bad knee predicts rain during your grave digging, Brother Cellerer promptly assigns him to copy meteorological psalms as penance for unseemly prognostication. The veterans treat death with the same pragmatic acceptance they apply to bad gruel or Brother Godric's singing. Brother Giraldus has already drafted his own epitaph. Here lies a faithful scribe, his margins clean, and stored it with his special quills. Brother Oswin occasionally leaves small offerings on Ambrose's grave. A particularly smooth pebble, a sprig of rosemary, when he thinks no one is looking. Only Brother Godric seems genuinely troubled by mortality, though this manifests primarily in him singing louder to the chickens, as if volume could ward off the inevitable. Your own mortality becomes harder to ignore with each fresh mound. That cough lingering since winter takes on new menace when you're the one digging graves. The stiffness in your hands after long hours in the scriptorium feels less like temporary fatigue and more like the opening verses of your own requiem. Even the minor luxuries you once smuggled, extra honey in your tea, that stolen hour of sunlight in the cloister, develop an urgent sweetness when framed by so many identical graves. The irony isn't lost on you that the monastery's greatest rebellion against worldly vanity results in its own kind of vanity. All those years avoiding personal possessions, suppressing individual quirks, forcing personalities into the same rigid mold, only to wind up equally anonymous in death. You mentioned this to Brother Oswin one evening, while patting down the earth over Brother Cellerer's deputy, taken unexpectedly by a fever. He responds by passing you a flask of suspiciously good wine, and pointing out how the newest graves are ever so slightly crooked, despite the abbot's best efforts. Small rebellions, it seems, outlast even death. By your 30th year, the graveyard has become as familiar as the cloister. You know which graves sink fastest in spring rains, which markers tilt toward the sunset, where the yew's roots have begun nudging up Brother Hildebrand's left foot in what you like to imagine is posthumous revenge for all those terrible jokes. The once daunting rituals of death are now just another office to perform, as routine as lauds or dishwashing. When young novices glance nervously at the newest mound, you find yourself repeating Brother Arnulf's old advice about bad knees and rain with the same gruff certainty. The day comes, as you always knew it would, when your cough outlasts the winter. Brother Infirmarian's tonics take on a desperate edge, his usual sadistic enthusiasm replaced by something almost resembling concern. The abbot assigns your lightest duties without comment, though you catch him studying you during chapter meetings with an expression you can't quite name. When the final fever takes hold, it's almost a relief. The brothers move through the familiar rituals with practiced ease. Last rites administered, shroud located, grave measured. Brother Geraldus even lets you approve your epitaph. Afadigasid Atharad, who kept his vowels even, a courtesy usually reserved for much older monks. Only Brother Oswin breaks protocol, pressing a stolen honey cake into your hand when the others aren't looking. The taste is sweeter than any sacrament. As the darkness gathers, you find yourself smiling at the absurdity of it all. The identical graves, the measured shroud, the lifelong struggle against individuality culminating in this perfectly orchestrated departure. Somewhere beyond the infirmary walls, you hear Brother Godric singing to his chickens off-key, as always, and it occurs to you that perhaps uniformity was never the point. Perhaps the true vow was simply showing up, day after day, to chant and itch and gossip and dig graves together until the bells rang for the final office. The last thing you see is Brother Oswin's wink as he discreetly adjusts your shroud, just enough askew to annoy the abbot. Some rules, after all, are made to be bent.